Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Kof Chaf, and we complete this long Masechet. On the previous daf, Rabbi Elazar taught that if one had a korban olah that was designated originally to be sacrificed on a bamat yachid, on a private individual bama, and then he brought it into the sanctuary area of the public bama, then the partitions absorb it for all matters, and it has to be treated according to all the laws of a bama gedolah. Now we have a follow-up question. Ba'ed bizera, olat bamat yachid, shechnisa lifnim, ve'otzia lahutz mahu. Same case, you had a korban on olah that was designated to be sacrificed on a bamat yachid, a minor bama, and then it was brought inside the sanctuary area. So at that point, yes, certainly it will take on all the laws of the bama gedolah. But then he brought it back outside. So what do we say about that? Do we say that once it entered into the sanctuary area, then it absorbs the sacrifice, and even if it goes out, it still has the same level, the high level, and has to be treated with all the laws of a bama gedolah? You have to bring it back in. Or do we say, since it left again, so it goes back to its prior status, and you can offer it on a private altar with the laws of a private altar? So we answer, Lav hainu pilugtad Rabba v'Rab Yosef. It seems that the answer to this question of Rabbi Zera is the same as the machloket between Rabbah and Rav Yosef in a similar case. Titnan, Mishnah Me'ilah teaches, Kodshe Kodashim sheshechatan badarom mo'alin bahen, ve'im alu lo yerdu. If you have Kodshe Kodashim, you're supposed to slaughter it in the north. If you slaughter it in the south, then you're not supposed to do that, but it still has some level of validity in that you still would commit me'ilah if you take a personal gain from it. And although it's invalid and lechatechila, you should not put it on the mizbeach. If b'diavad you already put it on the mizbeach, then you do not bring it down. That's the Mishnah. Ve'ibaya lehu yardu mahu sheya'alu. Rabba amar lo ya'alu, ve'Rav Yosef amar ya'alu. And we asked about that. What if, yes, you had this animal, kodshe kodashim, you did shechita in the north, and now you put it up on the mizbeach, but then it fell off. Now, do we put it back on again? Rabbah says, no, you do not put it back on again. And Rav Yosef says, you do put it back on again. So it seems that whatever you say about this would be the same as what you say about Rabbi Zera's question. Just like here, you have something that once you put it up on the mizbeach, and then it comes down, and Rabbah said, well, you don't put it back up again. That's it, it's not on anymore. So too, presumably, Rabbah would say, if I have a korban that was for a bamat yachid, and then it was brought into the sanctuary area, but then brought out again, then it goes back to its original status as a korban yachid, and you do not have to bring it back in. You do not have to treat it with the laws of a bama gedolah. Whereas Rav Yosef, who says that here, just like if you have a korban and you shouldn't put it up, but you did put it up, then even if it comes down, then it has to go back up. Once it's up on the mizbeach, then even if it comes down, you have to put it back up. It's permanently up there. It belongs up there. So too, presumably, Rav Yosef would say, if you have a sacrifice that was designated on a bama yachid, and then it went into the sanctuary area, even if it left, you have to bring it back in. So that seems to be that it would line up. But then we say not necessarily. The criteria of one issue might not be the same as the criteria of the other issue. Tibai l'Rabbah, we can ask Rabbi Zera's question even within Rabbah. Tibai l'Rav Yosef, and also within Rav Yosef. Tibai l'Rabbah, ad kan la ka'amar Rabbah ela b'mizbeach, techazile mekadesh, de la chazila mekadesh, ava mechisaf agav de la chazile kalta. Maybe Rabbah only says regarding the mizbeach that if it's something fit for the mizbeach, it becomes holy permanently. So if it's a totally proper korban, and it goes up and it falls down, then you have to put it back up. Yes. But if it's not fit for it, because it was sacrificed in the south, slaughtered in the south, then it will not become permanently kadosh. If it's up there, you leave it up there. But then if it falls down, you don't put it up there. That's true regarding the mizbeach. But when it comes to a mechitza, which is going into a totally new domain, then even if it's not fit for it, because this was a korban that was designated for a private bama, and now you bring it in to the sanctuary area, even though it was not originally fit for the sanctuary area. Now it's in this new domain, so then it absorbs it permanently. And if it goes out, you have to bring it back in. That's certainly a logical distinction to make. או דילמה, אפילו רב יוסף, עד כאן לה כאמר רב יוסף, התם אלא דחד מקום הוא, אבל החד דתרי מקומות נינהו לה. And we can ask about Rav Yosef also. Rav Yosef only says that when it comes to the Kodesh Kodashim, that goes up, then, and it falls down, you have to put it back up because it's all within the same area. So it's all within the Kodesh. So it didn't belong up there, but you put it up. Once you put it up and it comes down, you put it up again because it's still in the same area. So it's not going to lose its holiness status. However, in the case of Rabbi Zera, where it's two separate domains, so it was outside the sanctuary area, designated for a Bamat Yachid, and now went into the sanctuary area. Okay, so now you have to do the laws of Bama Gedolah. Okay, fine, but now it left again. That left the area entirely. So maybe now it loses its status. So that would be entirely consistent with Rav Yosef, or Odilma Lashena Teko, or maybe it doesn't make a difference. And just like he says, you have to put it back up when it falls down the mizbeh. Maybe it says you have to bring it back into the sanctuary even if it leaves again. And we leave this question standing. A matter which was clear to Rabbah on the one side, and it was also clear to Rav Yosef, although he disagreed on the other side. The Rabbi Yanai is debating and asks a question about a case that's very similar. So we assume that it would be the same thing, that whatever Rabbi Yanai is debating was something that Rabbah and Rav Yosef thought was already decided. Deba'er Rabbi Yanai, Ebre olat bamat yachid, shalu lamizbeach v'yardu mahu, hechad la mashpa behen ha'ur lati ba'elach, ki teba'elach hechad mashla behen ha'ur, mai teko. So here you have the limbs of a korban olah that was designated for a bamat yachid. And now the limbs, before we're talking about the whole animal going in, we're combining the two cases that we just said. So you have korban that was designated korban yachid, and now it's not just the animal that went into the sanctuary, but one of the limbs of that animal went up on the mizbeach and then came down. So what would you say in that case? Well, let's see. If the fire did not yet take hold of the item, then it's clear that you don't put it back up because, all right, fine, it was on the mizbeach physically, but it wasn't yet burnt by the fire. So then clearly you wouldn't put it back up. However, the question is, if the fire did take hold of it and then it fell off, what would you say about that? It seems that Rabbah and Rav Yosef, whatever they said above about the Kodesh Kodashim, they would say also about this case. But Rabbi Yanai was not sure which way it goes, and so we leave that also as a question that's unanswered. Itmar, Shechitat Laila Bat Yachid, Rav Shmuel, Chad Amar Keshera, Chad Amar Pesula, Vekami Palge B'Rabbi El Azar. There is a machloket about slaughtering sacrifices at night in the Bamat Yachid. In the Bamat Gedolah and the Bet HaMikdash, surely it can only be during the day. But how about in a private Bama? Rav and Shmuel have machloket. We don't know who says which one, but one of them says it's okay, and one of them says it's invalid. And they're arguing about the within the statement of Rabbi Elazar. The Rabbi Elazar Rameh Kira'eh Hadadeh. Ketiv Vayomer Begadetem Golu Elai Hayom Eben Gedolah. Rabbi Elazar brought two pisukim that seem to contradict each other. The pisukim are back to back. They are both in the story of Shaul, when he went and fought against the Pilishtim. And it says the people went to the spoils and took sheep and cattle and slew them on the ground and ate them in their blood. So people were doing something wrong. Either they were not slaughtering it properly, not making it a sacrifice, maybe they slaughtered it, but weren't sprinkling the blood. They were doing something wrong. they then told Shaul, and he said, behold, the people sin against Hashem and they eat the blood. And Shaul said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me this day. So, Golu elai hayom eben. This eben is going to be a mizbeach. So he said, okay, everybody, we got to fix this. We got to make it proper. And so bring this stone. We're going to make a mizbeach, and we're going to offer these sacrifices in a proper way. Notice he says hayom, during the day. So it sounds like you can only do this slaughter. This is a bama. It's a private bama, and you can only slaughter it during the day. That would support whoever says during the day. But then the very next pasuk says, Uchtiv vayomer Shaul pusu ba'am ba'amartem lahem hagishu elai ish shoro v'ish seyehu ushchattem bazeh v'achaltem velo techet'u ladonai le'echol al hadam v'hagishu kol ha'am ish shoro b'yado halayla v'ishchatu sham. So the next pasuk says, Shaul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, bring me every man his ox and sheep, slay them here and eat and sin not against Hashem in eating with the blood. And all the people brought every man his ox with them that night and slew them there. Over here it says they slew him at night. So this would support the other opinion that says you can make use a bamat yachid at night. But we have a problem because these are two pisukim back to back. So how are we going to reconcile them? Mor mishaneh kan becholin vekan bekodashim. So one of the sages will say, oh, it depends. When you said it was talking about at night, the second pasuk, that was holin. Some of the animals they slaughtered just to eat, not as sacrifices. So those they could do at night. However, the first pasuk that says it was during the day, that was talking about those were sacrificial animals. Those they made sure to do during the day. So the opinion that says that bamat yachid also can only be slaughtered there during the day will give this answer. The other opinion that says you can use bamat yachid even at night will give a different answer. That the first one that says only during the day, that's talking about sacrifices that they brought to the bama gedolah, and so it has to be during the day. Whereas the second pasuk that says they did it at night, that both of them were kodashim, both of them were sacrifices, but the second pasuk is talking about ones that they made on the bama ketana, and those can be brought at night. Itmar, olat bamat yachid. Rav amar en teona hefshet v'nituach. Rabbi Yochanan amar teona hefshet v'nituach. Another machloket. If you have a korban olah designated for a private bama, Rav said that you do not need to skin it and cut it into pieces. A normal olah in the Mishkan or in the Bet HaMikdash certainly needs to be skinned and cut into pieces. But Rav said that does not apply to bamat yachid. Rabbi Yochanan amar teona hefshet v'nituach. Rabbi Yochanan says even a bamat yachid does require flaying and cutting. And each of these Amoraim are arguing within the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Galili Tanya. Rabbi Yosef Galili Omer, Ola sheikri buisa bamidbar en teona hefshet v'nituach, she'en hefshet v'nituach ela me'ohel moed va'elach. Rabbi Yosef Galili, about this very topic, said that the Korban Olah that Bnei Israel offered in the desert did not require flaying and cutting, because flaying and cutting was only required from the time of Ohel Moed and on. So therefore, in the beginning of the desert stay, they did not have to do the flaying and the cutting. Now, what exactly does he mean? How will each of these Amoraim interpret it? Rabbi Yochanan said that from Ohel Moed and on, it doesn't matter whether it's a Bama Gedolah or Bama Ketana. Once they started with Ohel Moed, then all Korban Olah needs flaying and cutting no matter what. And Rabbi Yosef Galili is interpreted that way, and therefore that supports Rabbi Yochanan, who says that a private Bama also requires an Olah to be flayed and cut. However, Rav says that Rabbi Yosef Galili was only talking about Bama Gedolah, that from Ohel Moed and on, even at Gilgal, anywhere, but only on the Bama Gedolah, a Korban Olah has to be flayed and cut. But on the Bama Ketana, when Bamot were permitted, one did not have to do flaying and cutting. Tanya Kevatet Rabbi Yochanan. There is a Braita supporting Rabbi Yochanan that you have to everywhere, even in Bama Ketana. Devarim sheben Bama Gedolah Bama Ketana. This Braita is going to be a long list of items that are different and the same between the two types of Bamot. So the following things are different between a bama gedola and bama ketana. Keren v'chebesh v'yisod v'ribua bama gedola, ve'en keren v'yisod v'chebesh v'ribua bama ketana. In the bama gedola, you have to have a ramp and corners. You have to have the 4 corners that stick up on top and a ramp, and it has to be. And you need a base that sticks out and it has to be square. That's on Bama. But on a Bama Ketana, you do not need any of those things. Kior v'chano b'Bama Gedola, and kior v'chano b'Bama Ketana. You need a basin and the base of it on a Bama Gedola, but you don't need the basin and the base of it for Bama Ketana. Chazeh v'shok b'Bama Gedola, and chazeh v'shok b'Bama Ketana. For Korban Shelamim, you have to take the chazeh and shok and wave it and give it to the Kohen. But for Bama Ketana, you do not have to wave and give those pieces to a Kohen. Devarim sheshavta b'Bama gedola leb'Bama ketana shechita b'Bama gedola uktana. And the following things are the same regarding a Bama gedola and ketana. You have to do shechita of an animal in both. Hefshet v'nitol b'gedola uktana. Here's the one that we're waiting for. You have to do flaying and cutting into pieces both in gedola and ketana. That supports Rabbi Yochanan. Dam matir umfagel b'gedola uktana mumin uzman b'gedola uktana. And blood is what makes effectuates the korban, effectuates atonement. And once you sprinkle the blood, then the rest of the meat becomes permitted. And also, it's at the point of sprinkling the blood, that's when it will become pigul if one had wrong intention outside of the time before that. And that applies also to both gedola and ketana, and blemishes, and sacrificing it with intention to eat it or consume it in the wrong time. That applies both in gedola and ketana. Okay, so these are all things that apply in both, and now we're going to pick up on these last items. Aval notar v'hazman v'hatameh shavin bazeh ubazeh. These are in fact the last few words of the Mishnah, that the law of time and notar, zman and notar, both go hand in hand. Zman refers to all the laws of zman, including pigul, if one has intention to leave it after the time, to consume it after the time, or notar, if one actually consumes it after the time, or tameh, if one consumes the meat, sacrificial meat that becomes tameh, that these laws apply both to Bama Gedola and Bama Ketana. Baraita teaches, Tenorabanan, Minayin lasot zaman b'Bama Ketana ke Bama Gedola. How do you know that the laws regarding time apply to both Bama Ketana, just as they of course apply to Bama Gedola? Amara Torah, lan yisaref ufigul yisaref, ma pigul pasul bebama, aflan pasul bebama. The Torah said that if it is left over after its time, it must be burned. Also, if it's pigul, it must be burned. So therefore, just like pigul is not allowed, it makes it invalid. Also in a Bama Ketana, so tulan, which is one of the laws of Zaman, it makes it pasul in a Bama Ketana. So on that comparison, it would seem that yes, these laws apply to Bama Ketana. But then we argue the other way. Okelach lederech zo. Tamra Torah lan yisaref yoseh yisaref. Ma yoseh kasher bebama aflan kasher bebama. We're focusing on lan, and we can compare it the other way around. The Torah says that if it's left over past the time, it's burnt. And also if it leaves the temple courtyard, it also has to be burnt. So just like when it leaves, that is okay for Bama Ketana. That could leave the temple courtyard. You could do Bama Ketana anywhere at the time when Bama Ketana is allowed, of course. So too, we can learn from here that lan, if it's left over the time, it's kasher in a Bama Ketana. And if notar is permitted, then pigul also will be permitted, because that's just thought of doing that. So what are we going to do? So let's turn to a kavachomer. Velav kavachomer hu me'afot. We can learn a kavachomer from the laws of bird offerings. Ma'afot she'enamum posel bahen zaman posel bahem. Koche bama ketana shamum posel bahen anodin shezman posel bahen. If regarding bird offerings where a minor blemish is okay, it does not make it invalid. So afot are less stringent, and yet leaving it over the time and pigul, that those do apply to afot. Well, then kodashim, sacrifice on baketana, where the laws of blemishes do apply, so they are more stringent than birds. All the more so, the laws of zeman will make it pasul, not notar and pigul. But we can reject this kavachomer because There's a counter argument regarding birds. A non-Kohen cannot perform anything regarding the bird. It needs milikah. Milikah needs a Kohen, and everything about a bird needs a Kohen. All the major activities need a Kohen to do. So therefore, you cannot compare that to a bama ketana, where a non-Kohen can do anything. And the bama ketana, you don't need a Kohen at all. And so therefore, bama ketana is more lenient, and maybe that leniency will be reflected here also, that there's no law of notad. Lo yehezeman pasul ba. Maybe the zman does not make a sacrifice invalid in a bama ketana. So we now can argue this way and that way. We can't learn it from a comparison, and we can't learn it from a kal vachomer. So we'll end with a pasuk. Talmud omar v'zot torat zebach hashelamim la'asot zeman bama ketana kizman bama gedola. Therefore, we have a pasuk that says this is the law regarding shelamim. And the law means that the laws of Shelamim apply across the board. And this pasuk comes to teach that the laws of Shelamim for a bama ketana, for a private altar, are the same as for a bama gedola. And therefore, just like in a bama gedola, the laws of notad and pigol apply, so too they must apply also to a bama ketana. Hadran alach parat chatat useli kala masechet zevaḥim hazakim uberuchim on this major accomplishment.